Okay, thanks to everyone for coming. What I'm going to talk about today is a complex story. Got lots of different facets to it, and I'm going to try and do it in 40 minutes. So we'll see if this goes well. The story revolves around, well, one country, Bangladesh. I don't know if it's on your bucket list. I know several people in the audience have been to Bangladesh. It's one of the world's poorest countries. It has a household per capita income of $600. That's compared to about 48,000 in the US. It's got the worst traffic in the world, but there are some really, really exciting things that are happening in Bangladesh, one of the poorest countries in the world. The title, if all these great things are happening, why is GM Watch and other biotech or anti-GM groups, why are they against it? And I hope I'll be able to provide some of those answers. First, BT, well, let's see. Eggplant is called brinjal in Bangladesh and some other places. It's an important crop. It's grown by 150,000 resource-poor farmers. So these people might make $2,000 a year, if lucky. It's grown on about 50,000 hectares. Farmers spray a hell of a lot. They spray every 2 to 3 days with materials that, still, we don't use them in the US anymore. Things like parathion. Farmers spray a lot to try and control this particular insect here. It's a caterpillar called the eggplant fruit and shoot borer. And as you can see, it is mining through the eggplant. It also goes into the shoot. And if it goes into the shoot, there won't be a flower produced. There won't be a fruit that comes out of that flower. So this is a really devastating pest. Anyone ever heard about the term integrated pest management, or IPM? Show of hands. Wow, most of you have. I know Lisa has. IPM, I promise more, integrated pest management, whatever you want to call it. It was a concept that was developed by someone named Vern Stern, who was actually one of my professors at the University of California, Riverside. Which, if you're looking at this, that's the result of living in California and trying to learn how to surf, ever since I was a kid. So lived for 30 years in California and then moved to upstate New York, where I rarely see the sun. So Vern Stern, in 1959, developed this concept of integrated pest management. Think back a little bit. Rachel Carson wrote the book Silent Spring in 1962. That started the environmental movement. Vern Stern and colleagues in California, before Rachel Carson published Silent Spring, they realized some of the problems in using these broad spectrum insecticides, which were basically nerve toxins developed during World War II. They were broad spectrum. They might have killed the insect, but they also killed all of the natural enemies that were used to control this insect. It really disrupted the ecosystem on particular crops. So he came up with the idea of integrated pest management. And you see it has a foundation here. The foundation is to avoid the pests. And you can do that through cultural controls, plowing down the crop at the end of the season, biological control, really encouraging biological control to flourish, get a better understanding of the pest biology and ecology. Where are these pests coming from? But the most important part here is host plant resistance. And you try and get host plant resistance to the key pests. Now, there are many, many different pests. There's a complex of pests that, attack most crops, but there's always one key pest. And that's the one that you really try and get host plant resistance to. This is a quote from a book by C. Michael Smith in 1989. So traditional host plant resistance. This is developed through traditional breeding, things that Lisa Earle and many of the rest of you know about. And he said that there are about 100 insect-resistant crop cultivars that are grown in the US, with the majority of them major cereal crops, just economics. You don't want to spray those. You want to have some resistance to it, develop host plant resistance. Most of the host plant resistance has been to what we call the sucking insects. Many of you might think insects suck anyway, but there's a group of chewers, feeders, and sucking insects. The sucking insects are aphids, leafhoppers, whiteflies, and some in this order, Diptera, which is flies. There's been little success of host plant resistance for Lepidoptera, those are caterpillars, and for Coleoptera, those are our beetles. But those are our two most damaging orders of insect pests. So traditional host plant resistance has not really been effective for those. We also have this incredible insecticide that is really, really specific. And it's called Bacillus thuringiensis, or BT. It's a common soil bacterium. You could go out, Tony DiTommaso could go out to the lawn, he could find it, culture it. There are many different strains of BT. When the BT sporulates, it produces a protein that is toxic to some insects. It's been used since 1930 as a foliar spray. Organic farmers use it. It's very safe to humans and the environment. When an insect ingests it, that protein lodges with a particular gut receptor and causes the insect to get a big stomach ache and die. The insect essentially starves to death. But we don't have that receptor, so it just goes right through us.
Adds to your biome.
Yeah. So, very, very safe. So this is so selective. Most of the BTs work against Lepidoptera, those are the caterpillars. Some BTs work against the Coleoptera, those are the beetles. But it doesn't affect the natural enemies, like the parasites and the predators. So this is exactly what Vern Stern was looking for. Well, if we know so much about this, BT, could we take the genes for producing that bacterial protein and put it into a plant? So have the plant express it. So rather than spray it on, just have the plant express it. And that's exactly what was done in 1987. Insect-tolerant transgenic tomato plants. These are not on the market, but this was a good model system. I love this last sentence here. These engineered tomato plants represent a significant step to increased selectivity, specificity, and efficacy in insect control. And that's exactly what has happened. We now have host plant resistance through transgenic BT plants. We've never really had that before. Have farmers liked it? Yep. So this is the global area of biotech crops, but if you look at insect resistance, this blue line, these are just crops that have BT in them. And then if you add that figure to this one stacked, which is BT crops plus herbicide tolerant crops, add these numbers together, it comes out to 101 million hectares of BT crops that are out there. And look how fast that they've grown. They were first introduced in 1996. They've really taken off. Farmers really like this because they don't have to spray the crop. Now the crops that are BT crops are corn and cotton, maybe a bit of soybean down in South America. So this, from an entomological standpoint, this is something really to be celebrated. However, why don't we think about putting these into fruits and vegetables? This is a slide I think I probably got from someone else, but it shows there's something called the hidden hunger of malnutrition. You know, the Green Revolution was great for getting people to have available calories in rice and wheat and crops like that. But people can't live on rice or wheat alone. They need a diversified diet, and that's where fruits and vegetables come in that supply many of these nutrients and vitamins. And if you don't get those nutrients and vitamins, you will have this hidden hunger of malnutrition. There's a problem though. This is the total insecticide use. Annually, it's about $16 billion. If you look at where most of those insecticides go, 45% of them go to fruits and vegetables. So we're encouraging people to eat fruits and vegetables for their health, but we also know that they get treated a lot with insecticides. Is there a way around this? How about taking BT and putting it into some of these vegetables? And that's exactly what was done in a project funded by USAID involving Cornell through a program called Agricultural Biotechnology Support Program and an Indian seed company called Mahiko. This is the damage that the eggplant fruit and shoot borer does to eggplant. This is a picture of Usha Barwali from Mahiko. It's a company that was able to genetically engineer the BT eggplant. And here she's giving some seeds of this engineered plant to this fellow who's a chancellor at Tamil Nadu University in India, so he can give it to his breeders so they can breed it into local varieties. Stuff works really well. This is just a plot showing BT eggplant or brinjal versus non-BT. The yield is much, much higher here, and it's protected so you don't have to have these people spraying. And you notice the personal protective equipment that this person has. Basically, they're in bare feet. They have no mask over their eyes or their mouth. And this is just typical way that people spray eggplant in India and in Bangladesh. Tell me that's not a good situation. So, after 10 years of trialing these BT eggplant, it went through all the safety standards. You just can't put a biotech crop out there. You have to go through a lot of regulatory aspects to safety aspects to make it available to people. And it's usually about a 10-year process. After 10 years in India, fighting Greenpeace the whole way, Greenpeace has an anti-biotech policy. They just don't want it. Some of the original founders of Greenpeace left Greenpeace because they said it's not a scientific organization anymore. It has another agenda. Patrick Moore was one of the founders of Greenpeace, and he is now rallies against Greenpeace. When I was in college, you know, Greenpeace was great. They were against above ground nuclear testing. They were against whaling. And they still have some good policies that they're trying to develop, like, you know, climate change. They work quite strongly in that. But I, for the life of me, cannot understand why they're against biotechnology. They spent millions of dollars to campaign in India against biotechnology. They have people out here, for example, just presenting this member of parliament with what they said is going to be the last clean, non-GM brinjal to get out there. I mean, they're great at these shows. The result of all of this, though, was that on February 9th, 2010, Minister of Environment and Forest placed a moratorium on its use. He said he's not going to allow it to be grown, and there it sits. So if you're an eggplant farmer in India, what do you have? You're just going to go back to spraying. That's the only way that you can really produce this. Not a good situation. Meanwhile, just when this was happening, the Minister of Agriculture came over to Cornell and she said, we'd like to work with you to get this out. Well, we had already been working with Bangladesh starting in 2004. And I said, well, you know the problems India has and how it was shut down. And she said, my job as a Minister of Agriculture is to feed 160 million people and to protect the environment. And if BT brinjal can help us do that, let's go for it. And I said, well, you know what happened in India with Greenpeace? And she said, we are such a poor country in Bangladesh, Greenpeace does not have a presence. So, okay, let's go forward. And in 2014, this is the Minister of Agriculture giving some seedlings to this fella here from Bangladesh. I love Bangladesh men. They've got these great looking beards. So she gave 20 plants or seedlings to 20 farmers, and they planted them. As a biologist and also the new director in 2015, I was asking some questions. First of all, will this BT eggplant really control the eggplant fruit and shoot borer? Will it affect other non-target species, especially pollinators and biocontrol agents? We've done a lot of work over 30 years on this, and we've never seen any problem in trying to of the BT affecting parasites and predators. Never seen any problem with it. One question too is, will the insect rapidly develop resistance to this plant? And if it does, the whole thing's just going to implode. So Lisa Earle and I worked for a long time on looking at managing resistance. We wrote a paper actually in PNAS that says, it's not really great to put a single gene plant out there, a single BT gene that's expressing one protein. It's better if you can get a plant to express 2 proteins. Well, we don't have that plant, so the one gene plant went out there. Now we're trying to manage it so the insects will not evolve resistance. How will we control all these other sucking insects, the leafhoppers, the aphids, etc.? We need some selective insecticides that will help control that without compromising the control on the fruit and shoot borer. We also asked the question, will it reduce the overall insecticide use? Will it be profitable for farmers? Farmers are there in a business. They want to make some money. Management aspects. Who will produce and distribute the seed? Who will oversee its use in the field? Do they have a good extension service, for example? Who will educate the farmers and the consumers about this product? And who will lead the program for the long term when USAID funding disappears? So these are the questions that we asked ourselves. First question, will it control the eggplant fruit and shoot borer? Guess which one is the BT eggplant? It's very clear. It does a marvelous job of controlling it. In fact, all the trials that we've conducted over there, we find that BT brinjal or eggplant infestation was less than 1% compared to 48 to 57% in the non-BT brinjal. It does a remarkable job of controlling the target insect. It also increases, insecticide use is reduced by 61 to 98%. One farmer I was talking to, I said, how many sprays did you use in your non-BT field? He said, 100. How many sprays did you use in your BT field where you needed it to control the sucking insects? He said, 2. 98% reduction, that's remarkable. That's better than anything that any other strategy I've ever heard of. Farmers also realized a 6-fold increase in the net return. There's no harmful effects of BT brinjal on the non-target organisms. Thousands of farmers have been trained. The Bangladesh Agricultural Research Institute, otherwise known as BARI, is producing the seed. We've tried to work with them to develop a more rigorous stewardship practice. So good seed that's expressing the BT protein has to get out there. Right now, BARI is the only one producing that. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? We'll talk about that later. For those who read Bengali, this is some of the material that goes out to the farmers who receive the seed. These are the 4 BT lines that are approved. There's 3 more in the pipeline. This situation here, this looks like kind of like a football field. The red around here shows the farmers that they have to plant non-BT seed as a border around the field of BT, shown by the green here. The reason for that is resistance management. Basically, these serve as a refuge for susceptible alleles in the insect population, and this is one of the strategies that is incredibly important so the insects don't evolve resistance. So, we provide that information to the farmers, and we try and follow up on it. We also have information, frequently asked questions about BT brinjal. This is written for the farmers and also for people who are interested about this. This is also myths and truths about BT brinjal. The worst thing to do is to just give these plants or give the seeds to farmers and have them just plant it with and think it's going to be exactly like non-BT brinjal, because they may not, except that it'll control insects, because they may not spray for these sucking insects. They may think it also controls diseases and other things like that. So we have a major effort to make sure that the farmers really understand about BT brinjal, what it can do and what it can't do. So why has BT brinjal been very successful in Bangladesh versus in India, where it was not successful? Politics, politics, politics. This is the Minister of Agriculture at a conference, and she says, we will be guided by the science-based information, not by the non-scientific whispering of a section of people. Can you imagine anyone in Washington saying that? Interesting enough, I was watching a CNN interview with Elizabeth Warren, fiery speaker. And at one point, she said, I have a new concept. And it's a new concept, and I try and make sure that the people in Washington hear it. She says, I believe in science. So, what a powerful statement. This is a Minister of Agriculture who also believes in science too. So she has been a strong advocate for this project. We've also tried to reach out to the general public, to the media, about all of the work that we're trying to do with this project. So it's a Feed the Future. It's funded by USAID, and this is our website. If you go to bteggplant.cornell.edu, you can see this home page. In this website, we have videos of farmers talking about BT brinjal. We have peer-reviewed studies, easy access to that. So we try and put all of the information we possibly can on this website about BT brinjal, so it'd be easily accessible. So who are we trying to serve with this project? People like this. This is a farmer who's been growing BT brinjal in Bangladesh for about 3 years now. This is with his wife and daughter. And you look at them, look at the daughter's eyes. I mean, she looks a little leery of having her picture taken, but these are the people who are benefiting from this technology. They're really benefiting from it. So I could end the story here, but then I wouldn't address the second part of the title about groups being against it. So anyone who reads a newspaper, who has done any work in biotechnology, you know, there is certainly an effort to stop GMOs, genetically modified organisms, which is a term that, you know, most scientists really hate because everything has been genetically modified. We prefer the term genetically engineered, but the term is already out there. And this is a march against GMOs. In brinjal, in Bangladesh, I mentioned that there really wasn't a lot of movement against brinjal when it first came out. I think it really caught the antis by surprise, really caught them off guard. That's not the case anymore. If you Google GM Watch eggplant, you come up with a list of websites. BT brinjal still failing in Bangladesh. This is from GM Watch. Kind of interesting because Alliance for Science, which is a Gates-funded project based at Cornell, that also shows up on this website if you're looking for GM Watch eggplant. Feed the Future South Asia Eggplant Improvement Partnership. That's the BT eggplant website that I just showed. British Broadcasting Company dismisses anti-GM complaints over Bangladesh BT brinjal. So anyway, you Google that and you get a lot of other information as well. But let's just focus on GM Watch. GM Watch is a UK-based anti-biotech organization. They're closely aligned with Greenpeace and also in Bangladesh with this group called Ubining. And they just put out a report. Actually, it was just about, I think it was last month they put out this report saying that farmers are abandoning BT brinjal. So let me just go to the executive summary of that. So they interviewed over the phone 48 farmers who had grown BT brinjal in the past. Out of actually 108, they got that wrong. They interviewed farmers by phone, and they come up with these statements. All 48 farmers who started cultivating BT brinjal in 2014 did not continue in subsequent years. They're abandoning it. Only 13 continued for 2014, gradually decreasing to 10%, then to 4%. I don't think 4% is exactly did not continue in subsequent years, but anyway, regardless of the numbers, they said that there is definitely a trend in which 48 farmers, by their phone interview, with 48 farmers, 73 abandoned BT cultivation in the next rounds. Whoa. So am I wrong or are they wrong? You know, you read something like this and say, okay, let's look at it a little bit more closely. Well, here's a statistics. Who's that? Kai Risval, who does the marketplace on NPR. He says, let's do the numbers. Okay, let's do the numbers. We had 20 farmers in 2014, 108, 250, 6,500, 27,000. Farmers are pretty smart people. No one's holding a gun to their head and saying, you grow this or I'm going to shoot you. If farmers can see an advantage, they will use it. And that's exactly what has been happening. So throughout Bangladesh now, you are finding many, many farmers growing BT brinjal. They get this seed from Bari or from an outlet. They can buy it from an outlet. But many of the farmers, because this is an open pollinated line, many of the farmers are actually saving their seed. So there's 27,000 farmers, there's probably 5,000 to 10,000 farmers more who are doing it through saving their seed or selling it to other farmers. So,
What is the source for these numbers?
pardon me?
What is the source for these ones, for these numbers?
So these are all the seed that comes out is accounted for. So these are government figures. Yeah, it's just on the seed that is being produced and being sold.
Did you say Bari is supplying these numbers? What do you mean
Let me get to that in a minute. Okay. So let me just go back to, you know, if we all believe in science, there's reports that have been published. This is one that was in PLOS 1. It's a study that we designed in Bangladesh about looking at their production and control of the fruit and shoot borer and the effects on non-target arthropods and the economic return. This is another report, socioeconomic performance of BT eggplant cultivation in Bangladesh. IFPRI, International Food Policy Research Institute, just put out a publication in which they looked at, I think, I'm trying to remember, 600 BT farmers and 600 non-BT farmers. And this other publication too. Collectively, these 4 studies conclusively demonstrate that this stuff works. It controls the eggplant fruit and shoot borer. It also recognizes that control of the sucking pest is required to get maximum yield. So you might get 10, 15% reduction of the eggplant if you don't control those other insects. But the BT eggplant will control the eggplant fruit and shoot borer incredibly well. Farmers also obtain a better return, 5 to 6-fold, and they dramatically reduce their use of insecticides. Can you imagine spraying 100 times with a backpack sprayer out in a field without any personal protective equipment? So I've also attended a number of farmer field days. These are just like, you know, in New York we run onion or cabbage or corn field days, not quite under these colorful tents, but it's the same kind of thing. We get farmers out there talking with other farmers who have been growing BT brinjal. And we ask the question, who wants to grow BT brinjal next year? Nearly every hand went up. That's not abandoning BT. So we are doing a lot of pushing back on misinformation. You can call it fake news or whatever you want, but it's misinformation, and we are fighting it with websites, with Facebook, YouTube, Twitter accounts, and someone's got a phone ringing. So it's important to get our word out there that this product is really, really working. I do have some concerns about the project. Again, It only expresses a single cry protein.
Green bees calling.
What?
Somebody's starting to call into the room, but it might just be green bees calling.
Well, let's talk to him. Only producing cry 1AC, that it would be a lot better to have another BT protein in those plants. We don't have that yet. We do have that refuge, which is that line of non-BT plants around. That's working well. One of the things, though, is that we don't have a BT variety that is suitable for the summer season. The 4 BT lines that are out there are suitable for the winter season. The summer season is when the eggplant fruit and shoot borer is at its peak. So during its peak, without any BT brinjal out there, they're not going to be exposed to BT. So that is a good resistance management strategy. I've got questions about, can the government agencies produce sufficient high quality seed? A demand has been created, 27,000 farmers. Can the government really produce that? Well, the next question is, will the government allow the private sector to enter the market? That's what we would like to see, and certainly USAID would like to see it, so they don't just they'd like to see the private sector get in there. What about labeling the product? On the condition for approval, the government said a couple agencies got in a pissing match. They went back and forth and they said, got to label the product. Anyone ever been to a developing country? How do you label every single brinjal out there? You can't. Maybe in a supermarket, you could do. So we are trying to help them modify that requirement. Can Bangladesh sustain the product without continued funding from USAID? USAID has told us, I was just in Bangladesh last 2 weeks, and they said, we are probably not going to continue funding this. The government ought to take it over. Okay? Will that work? Finally, this question is, will those opposed to biotechnology stop BT brinjal like they did in India? Bangladesh, one of the poorest countries in the world, difficult to work in. Who's ever been to Bangladesh? Yeah. Difficult to work there? Yeah. We were going up to a field trial. It was 110 miles, and it took us 10 hours to drive there. Yeah, Bangladesh is a difficult place to work, but some exciting things are happening there. Not just with brinjal, but there's some other potential GM food crops in Bangladesh. They're going to start field testing golden rice, and also late blight resistant potatoes. These are 2 important biotech efforts to get out there. Right now, the brinjal is the only one out there, and we don't really want to see it get screwed up. So, how do we move forward on it? Well, we've got a lot of satisfied farmers with it. How do you once the genie is out of the bottle, how can you take this technology away from them, especially with open pollinated lines? They will continue to use this, but we want to make sure that they use it responsibly. Thank you. Take any questions? You had one, Jonathan.